Good evening. My name is Talha Köse. I'm the director of SETA Brussels office. Today, we're going to touch on a very important and significant topic we have been dealing since the beginning of this week. And definitely, this is an important issue for both NATO and for Turkey and for the future of the NATO alliance. And there are issues and processes that are against contradictory, and there are positions that are also contradictory in this issue. Although among the members of the NATO, there is a likelihood of support for Finland and Sweden's membership to NATO and an overall support for the open door policy and expansion of NATO, there are certain concerns from Turkey and there are certain concerns from a couple of other countries. So today we're going to talk about NATO membership process of especially Sweden and Finland, and why there's a need for such a enlargement, and what are possible consequences of this enlargement, and especially why Turkey is reluctant and why Turkey is critical, especially of Sweden's membership to NATO. So my name is Talha Köse. So today we will have two very important, very distinguished scholars. Dr. Murat Aslan. He is a professor of international politics and security at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. In addition to his academic career, he had a long, is a retired official and long career in NATO and in Turkish armed forces, and he's an expert in many of the issues, concrete issues. And our second speaker is Vişne Korkmaz. She's a professor of international relations and security at Nişantaşı University. So she contributes a lot to our research and our discussions. So she's been writing about European security, Turkey, Russia relations, grand geopolitics, especially of the Eastern European countries, and energy geopolitics. So actually, we had one more speaker, but we had to cancel at the last moment due to a couple of restrictions. But I think this debate will continue for a while in the coming weeks as well. So I would first like to start with Murat Aslan. And I will, of course, there are lots of arguments in favor and against the enlargement of NATO, and positive and negative views about Sweden and Finland's membership. But especially Turkey has very significant concerns. So I would request Murat Aslan to explain why Turkey is especially concerned about Sweden's membership, and what is wrong with this process, and what are the issues in Sweden, and also he will highlight in Finland. So after the presentations, we'll have also a Q&A session, and you can also ask some questions from the social media, our YouTube, Facebook account. So please feel free to make some comments on social media and ask questions. So Dr. Murat Aslan, the floor is yours. So please explain us why Turkey is against Sweden's membership.
Thank you, Professor. First, I would like to thank for this opportunity, because as far as this, not crisis, but this situation escalated in media, we have some certain channels to express our own. But this is a direct talk that we can verbally express ourselves with an emotion, even though we are an academic. And I will try to really stick to objectivity. I mean, I do not favor this party or that party, but just try to, fix exactly what the situation is and why. And in terms of being objective in this issue, I would like to just remind one thing. I worked with Swedish and Finland's armed forces in Bosnia and also Afghanistan, twice in each. I have so many friends from their armies. And believe in me, they are really professional. I have to admit it. So there's no problem with the Swedish armed forces, the capacity, etc., etc., etc. I totally respect their flag, their country, their armed forces. So I have to admit it from the very beginning. So please, in my speech, do not perceive anything as an offensive, but just a reminder. Well, for the membership of the Sweden and Finland, there is one thing you should be delineated. The membership of both are somehow circulated in media together. I mean, people just equated both countries. No, they are different. The second thing, this issue, just popped up after the escalation or Russian aggressive in Ukraine. It's a war of aggression. I mean, it's Russia who offended, who attacked Ukraine. So there's one thing, reality, and it just motivated and also mobilized the sense of threat in the Eastern Europe and mainly in Baltic Sea. Why? Because in the Baltic Sea, there were flights of Russians and the UK and some regional countries, NATO, and think that actually not the rest of the world, but Baltic was a point of concern for the Baltic states and also the UK. So it's a general avenue of approach from Russia to the UK and also the regional powers. And now they have realized that a conventional warfare in the globe, mainly between Russia and another actor, is a possibility. And Baltic Sea is one of the essential locations that they can easily witness an escalation against any, even though NATO is included, even though they are even part or not part of it. Another issue, well, so I think we have to confess one thing. Even though Ukraine was screaming just to be a member of NATO, refused by NATO. I mean, it was frozen. There were some wishful thinkings, but now we are discussing Sweden and Finland, and it's not fair just to treat Ukraine in such a way. This is another reality. Another issue, membership to any alliance needs a calculation. Calculation of what? First, the parties applying for a membership does have an expectation. It's even security or somehow any other field. On the other hand, the structure they are interested in, well, they also expect certain capacities and capabilities. On the other hand, there will emerge some certain threats and risks just because of this membership, or maybe not including this specific country to the alliance, like we had witnessed in Ukraine. In the Swedish and Finnish case, well, we have to judge it together. So what will Sweden and Finland contribute to NATO's capacities? What will be the burden on NATO? And how NATO could contribute to the defense of these two countries? That's the question. I mean, the first part of my speech will exactly cover the NATO and Sweden and Finland, not Turkey. Well, any country in NATO is expected to have a marginal surplus in the defense capacity. That's why we had discussed 2% expenditure in military in the previous decade. And second thing, each country, member country, somehow contributed to the readiness, combat readiness of NATO by means of their units. And there's a network, and each country is a part of this network. And in this calculus, I believe we have to go through exactly the demography, the geopolitics, capacity of both countries. If I would be a NATO General Secretary, I can't, I believe, then I would check what they will bring with them. Well, Sweden they both are actually, in terms of demography, small sized in comparison to other countries, but except with exceptions. Okay, let me see. The population is 10 million and 5.5 million in Sweden and Finland, respectively. Well, the median age, and the average age is just above 41 and 42, respectively. The population growth is, 74 in every 1,000 in Sweden and 26 in every 1,000 in Finland. Their countries are half size of Turkey. That means, in comparison to the demography, rather bigger. Then they can't cover all country in the meantime. And the manpower dedicated for military services, well, it's 3.4 million in Sweden and 1.9 million in Finland. And the budgets, 8.6 billion and $6.03 billion in both countries. Well, then they need NATO coverage, and that's why they are applying for that. Then what is the risk of this participation? Well, we should check the map. In the map, these countries are located at the northwest of the Baltic Sea, and think that all countries surrounding the Baltic Sea will be NATO members, except Russia, for sure, with an extension in Kaliningrad. And these countries will be a factor in NATO defense plans. Then NATO's responsibilities will expand in Baltic Sea. Okay, now let's check, for instance, these countries, risks for NATO, because if they apply and nominate, and later and they are nominated and they become a member, so what will be the counter move of Russians? Well, it's not regional, it's strategic, it's structural. They will observe, exactly underpin what NATO does in both countries, and they will react, either passively, sometimes proactively. Then there's a probability of escalation in the mood of the Cold War. This is another thing. Okay, then let me just pass to Turkey. Why? Because Turkish stance is a bit, questioned for the last 1 month in the Western media. Well, NATO is an organization, and each time NATO, becomes an attraction for probable candidates, it becomes a point of negotiation and sometimes bargaining. If you just check the membership of some countries, for instance, North Macedonia, it was Greece resisted a lot up until they changed their name. I mean, changing the name of a country. It's not an easy issue. You just demand to change your name. I am Murat, and if somebody says you will be not Murat but John, I will resist it. This is a part of my identity. But in this case, Greeks offended Macedonians and demanded a change in their name. And Macedonians, for the sake of security in Balkans, accepted it, even though Greeks preferred a wrong name, because North Macedonia means what? There is a South Macedonia. Think that there was a bargaining for many years just for the name. So in the case of the membership of Sweden and Finland, it's really normal to have a bargaining, just to have what they will, in what field they will give up. And Turkish position is very clear. Well, in the lowest echelon, Turkey says they are supporting terrorism. Why? In Sweden, we first had PKK in 1982. In 1983, there was an internal dispute in PKK, and they just executed some of their members. What happened? Sweden deported 18 members of PKK, but as a response, PKK assassinated the Prime Minister of Sweden, Olof Palme. And as the years passed, I see that Sweden just inhaled this existence. I don't know why. And now they normalized the identity of PKK, even though they perceive them as terrorists. The other branches, the sister offshoots of this organization are currently in Sweden, and unfortunately, they forgot the assassination of Olof Palme. Another issue, currently, 4 of them are media, I mean TV channels or huge media institutions. There are 11 organizations of PKK with differing names, and they are receiving Swedish funding. Meanwhile, they pledged as support to Syrian branch of PKK, like $376 million for this year, and it was announced in 2021. So think that there's an existential perceived threat in Turkey regarding PKK and the sister organizations, and Sweden not only assisted but provided funding. And afterwards, we have discovered that there are Swedish weapons in the hands of PKK members, not SDG, not SDF or anything else, but PKK members. They were captured either in Turkey, Iraq, or Syria. And they were anti-tank weapons made in Sweden. Well, if you want to export a single piece of weapon, like an anti-tank weapon, as an ammunition, doesn't matter, you must have an end user certificate from the Ministry of Defense. Then you can deliver it. Neither of any defense companies can sell any sort of defense item to another country without the permission of the Ministry of Defense. If there is an illegal smuggling, how? These weapons are produced for whom? They have serial numbers on top. So now Turkey says, well, if these weapons are captured, if you pledge or grant that amount of money, and at the end of the day, if you tolerate the existence of PKK and also FETÖ member who plotted a coup d'etat in Turkey in 2016, why? What will change? So what will be the attitude of Sweden afterwards? Well, for Turkey, this is what I have observed. There must be a clear step back from the current practices of Swedish government. Let's go to Finland. They have also some units, some cells of PKK and FETÖ members. Well, at least they are open to discussion and ready to negotiate it. That's good. At the end of the day, this is the Turkish perception. And I would like to remind one more thing that's really important for me. Well, Turkey became a member of NATO in 1952. But right after what? Korean War. And the ratio of casualties in this war for Turkish military was 22%. What does that mean? 1 in every 5 was either wounded or killed in action. And some of them are actually still, we don't know where. They are lost, disappeared, either captured by North Koreans or Chinese, etc. I don't know. And still we don't know whereabouts. So that was the burden of being a member of NATO. And today, what is the burden to be a member for Sweden and Finland? Only the threat perceived just because of Russia. So they must pledge something. And finally, I would like to remind one more thing. Turkey is waiting at the gate of European Union since 1963. I mean, it's just like a half century. And think that if they become a member of NATO, without being a member of EU, Turkey will pledge a security guarantee under the umbrella of NATO. Then, if Turkey waits such a long time, then Sweden and Finland must be aware, and European Union as well. So if EU pursues NATO as a security extension of the Union, well, it's not fair. Then they must accept Turkey as a member of the European Union. We can equate exactly the members of both organizations, then no problem. Well, if Norway does not want to be a member of EU, it's their option, it's their preference. But it's not fair to have Turkey at the gate for many years, for 4 decades. But sorry, then Sweden and Finland think about it, and also the Brussels. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aslan. So I'm sure even the Swedish public is not aware of the crimes that are committed by PKK, including the ones that are within the domain of Sweden. I'm not mentioning possible contributions of Sweden, but I think in international media, I mean, there's some portrayal that, you know, Sweden plays safely with some of these organizations. However, I think the portrait you tried to picture is quite bleak. I mean, I think Turkey's concerns are quite valid for the moment. So I'm gonna switch to our second speaker, Professor Vişne Korkmaz. Of course, inclusion of or possible inclusion of Finland and Sweden will definitely change the global geopolitics, the global competition. I mean, it's going to go to extend to Baltics and even the Arctic, and it will have a long-term ramifications for both Russia as well as NATO. So this is a game-changing effect. So what is your assessment on this? I mean, how this, if they are accepted to NATO, how will this change the global geopolitics, and how Russia will respond to this transformation?
Okay. Thank you, Taha Hoca, and I want to thank also SETA Brussels for this very timely panel. The topic is very hot and a multi-faced one, as you mentioned. I mean, there are different levels and layers of related to different levels of strategic thinking in this issue. On the one hand, possible membership of these two Nordic states to NATO is related to reconstruction of European security architecture. Russia, before the Ukrainian war, actually challenged European security structure. We easily remember sending letters of demand to Washington, D.C. and Brussels. Kremlin also voiced its opposition in different occasions to the enlargement of NATO, to the Baltics, to the Eastern and Central Europe. And also, Putin himself also criticized NATO's deployment, military deployments to these areas, zones of sphere of geopolitical areas. At the end today, we should admit that we are far away of cooperation between Russia and NATO. Once we had such kind of cooperative schemes, but these schemes, these platforms, all were ended with Ukrainian war, and we don't know what kind of confrontation emerges in the near future. So under this uncertainty, actually, we discuss possible memberships of this Nordic duo, or I agree with Dr. Aslan. We should actually discuss Finland's and Swedish memberships to NATO separately, but usually they combine together as two Nordic countries having connection to Baltics, Northern Sea and Arctic, all these geopolitical scenes. Also, in today's conditions, Russia seems to be stuck in a kind of war of attrition in Ukrainian scene. This war can also be easily interpreted as a proxy war, waged by USA in order to constrain Russia, and it does not seem to be very costly war for the US. That is why Washington continues to keep supporting war efforts of Ukrainian forces. What does it mean? It means that war will probably prolong either in a scenario of escalation to de-escalation. Usually it's called like this, escalation to de-escalation, but this scenario can easily turn to be escalation to escalation scenario, which means stalemate in an escalatory atmosphere. Or we can have another scenario in the edge of Europe, which is simple stalemate, de-escalation without a winning party. So in any case, we are not so close to, or anyway close to any kind of peace agreement. So we expect that Russia continues to stay as the main aggressor at the European future security architecture or security structure, and continue to have escalatory instruments. That means European actors should be ready to the not so pleasant scenarios, range from escalation to stalemate. It is why Sweden and Finland shifted their traditional foreign policy from neutrality to seeking membership to a regional defense pact, which has nuclear weapons. Actually, this is a huge shift, and ironically, many experts congratulate Putin for this shift. But at that point, we can ask many questions. Some already mentioned by Dr. Aslan, whether they are ready for this shift from neutrality to be allied. I mean, in terms of interoperability, there seems not a major problem existing. But in terms of being ready to alliance politics is a different story. It needs to be ready to grasp the importance of indivisibility of security in an alliance, reliability of deterrence, negotiations and bargainings. So we can ask such kind of questions, and even not only Turkey but other NATO members, for example, Croatia or Hungary, also ask this type of questions. And the most referred question in this framework is related to possible reactions of Russia to this membership, or the possible memberships of these two Nordic states. Here there is a kind of ambiguity actually. When this issue came to scene at first, we can easily remember that Russia threatened to use of force against possible enlargement of NATO towards the Nordic states. At that time, Kremlin talked about self-defense rights of Russia, and nobody has doubts about the strategic importance of the membership of these Nordic states to NATO, because on the one hand, it will strengthen access of NATO to Baltics, North Sea, and Arctic. And these three areas are also zones of anti-access or denial strategies of Russia. If you think about the position of Kola Peninsula and the Northern Sea and the existence of Northern Fleet there, you can easily understand how this area is important for the Russian nuclear forces. As well as this area is important for Russia to have access to Atlantic. If you think about again the position of Norway, Greenland, Iceland, and United Kingdom. So, I mean, it is almost a kind of important zone between Baltic Seas, North Sea, and the Atlantic. On the other hand, it will strengthen, I mean, the membership of these two states to NATO. Will strengthen defense of two northern states by covering their mainly demographic vulnerabilities, especially related to defense of their northern parts at the face of possible conventional attacks coming from the third party. So, I mean, if we think these factors, we can easily understand the concerns of Russia on the one hand, and why these two states are seeking NATO membership in terms of deterrence, in terms of defense capabilities, etc. On the other hand, recently, however, Russian officials seem to shift their position from threatening to what I can call cautious patient. I mean, Lavrov and Putin announced in the last 10 days that the membership of Nordic states to NATO will not create a big difference, but Russia will respond if NATO forces will be deployed in these two countries. This shift is interpreted differently by the experts. Some believes that it is the direct result or direct ramification of weakness of Russia and how she has strategic difficulties, conventional difficulties in Ukrainian Sea. And according to them, Kremlin has no power to prevent possible memberships of these two states by any preventive measures. So there will be no escalation scenario. My position here, yes, but yes, escalation under today's conditions, under in the while the Ukrainian war is continuing and while United States continue to support Ukrainian war efforts there, any kind of escalation in Baltics can be very risky and costly for Russia, but still we should not forget that Russia has nuclear deterrence. So for Kremlin, escalation can always be an option if Kremlin decides that there is nothing to lose. So we should think about this. On the other hand, for others, Russia actually, how they interpret this shift from threatening to, wait and see policy. Russia actually, according to them, Russia actually seeks reassurance from either Brussels or from these northern states. If so, the issue of debate is reliability of reassurances. Today, just very recent news actually, just before the panel, I recognized that, I noticed that Putin announced that Russia will deploy all kinds of military bases, forces, weapon systems at the border between this Nordic duo and Russia. So at the first glance, it is related to deterrence, but I want to recall recall yesterday's SETA meeting actually related to European security architecture. In this meeting, in this panel, Nurşin Ateşoğlu Güney mentioned the possibility of new Trumpist era in the US. Yes, the midterm elections are coming, and we know that there is always a kind of Trumpist tendency in the US politics. So a new president can adapt in the future more Trumpist foreign policy tendencies and can choose to put a distance between U.S. and U.S. partners in either Europe or NATO. And if so, I mean, this means, of course, strengthening of fear of abandonment for the European partners, etc., etc. But also, we should think about in such kind of situation, what does this confrontation line between the northern states and Russia mean for NATO? So, as you can see, mention, I mean, this membership can be a game changer, yes, but it can also trigger, not maybe in very close future, but in the after close future, it can trigger such kind of confrontational scenarios related to U.S. Possible shifts in U.S. Foreign policy tendencies. Now, I don't know whether I have time or not, but maybe I just now stop and continue with the Q&A.
Yeah. I mean, we'll have definitely a much dynamic Q&A session. But the follow-up question, I mean, yes, due to current Russian threats, there is sympathy to Finland and Sweden's membership, but are the NATO members aware of how geopolitically this will expand the NATO's mission, NATO's responsibilities? I mean, as far as I see, I'm trying to follow the developments in Brussels, but I don't see a net assessment on these issues. Yes, I mean, American President Biden is in favor. Some other EU member countries are in favor, but there is no, clear assessment of strategic assessment, capability assessment, and long-term ramifications on this issue. Because some people argue that the next battle, next confrontation will be in the Arctic, and with these new members, yes, NATO may be stronger at the Arctic, but at the same time, it is possible that some countries who have no stakes, no interest in the Arctic region will be engaged in such a struggle. So, do you agree on this? I mean, are there awareness on this issue? I mean, as far as I know, in Turkey, we'll look at the situation from a very different perspective. We are more concerned about, terrorism, terror threat, and we try to satisfy our objections at that level. But there are broader geopolitical complications that may be connected to this issue. So what is your take on Vişne Hocam?
Okay, yes, that is very good question. And actually, I mean, as you mentioned, there is an ambiguity here. I mean, yes, they understand Sweden's and Finland's position, and also the other European members of NATO. They also are under the stress of this geopolitical confrontation prolonging in Ukraine. They cannot be sure about the future's tendencies and the future commitments of the United States. The Biden administration now has a strategic reason to prolong this war to constrain Russia. It is, as I mentioned before, it is a cheap war for the US. But in the future, nobody can be sure about whether US continue to commit when Washington's obligations under NATO or in European security. We experienced different US administration, and we actually observed the shift of US strategies from one end to another in the within a couple of years. So Europeans felt the stress of prolonging of this war. It's continue to bring a huge cost to European states. They have to continue to adapt, if not further, but adapt the existing sanctions. And if there is no peace agreement in the near future, they have to continue to this strict position related to Russia, and this brings them to, if not the military, but in a kind of economic and diplomatic confrontation with Russia. So they understand, under this ambiguity, they understand Finland's and Sweden's why these two states seek NATO membership in terms of deterrence and defense. But on the other hand, there are geopolitical ambiguities related to U.S. position, as I mentioned before, and this is maybe the most important one. And another important maybe condition is related to Russian position, whether Russia will adapt escalatory instruments or not, will use escalatory instruments or not. So I don't actually think that European states or the NATO members are fully ready to these two scenarios: abandonment of US and escalation with Russia. For the US, even these two scenarios maybe will not create a big difference, but for European partners and European members of NATO, these two scenarios mean various. They indicate various difficulties, various strategic difficulties. This is why not only Turkey but the others also, Hungary, Croatia, and the other states also question what kind of the membership or what kind of the strategies should NATO offer these states feeling themselves insecure at the face of Russian aggression. If in the near future the Ukrainian war will end with a peace treaty, everything will be much more simpler. But I don't think so. And in this kind of stalemate, this means that ambiguities related to aggressive position of Russia continues, and Russia continues to use, at least to make visible the escalatory instruments that she had in her hands. That is the major difficulty, and this is why the issue is not so simple. I can understand fully the Turkish opposition, but apart from that, from the strategic point of view, this issue is not so simple.
Yeah, thank you. I also agree that this no war, no peace situation, even if there's a ceasefire or a quasi-ceasefire, this no war, no peace situation will continue for a while. This is a Russian style, and I think this will bring longer-term ambiguities for all the NATO member countries. So we have to be probably ready for such a change, shift. So Murat Hocam, I have difficulty to understand why Sweden is helping PKK, YPG. Is it part of a larger strategy? Or, we know that Sweden is neutral since the Napoleonic Wars or since the Vienna Congress. So a country that portrays itself as a peaceful country contributes to mediation, conflict resolution efforts. I closely follow, as part of my profession, conflict resolution involvement of Sweden, which is appreciated. On the other hand, there's this terrorist organization that led to death of thousands of people in Turkey, and they clearly have a propaganda and ideology that is quite violent. So why do you think why Sweden is supporting this YPG, PKK, and how do they legitimize, how do they formulate this policy? I mean, do they really benefit from this, or what is your take on this?
Thank you. There are many dynamics for this. I mean, it's not only about the political preference of the prime minister or foreign minister, etc., etc., but there has been an accumulation. The first thing, for instance, the current foreign minister and Lind, well, politically, she likes it. I mean, maybe a personal option. I don't know. That means it starts with the psychology, but I think we should go through the mechanisms and also the historical background. In 1980s, when some people tried to immigrate to the European countries, the excuse they had argued was that they are under pressure in Turkey. Think that it was 1982, 83. Well, there was a military coup d'etat in 1980. And this excuse was accepted by Sweden. And once any member of their family, their clan, or their friends wants to immigrate, this excuse had been circulated a lot. So right after PKK arrived in Sweden, then they exploited the existence of these people who claimed that because they were not that much, they were completely different from PKK. They were surging their personal benefits, and they used them. And it was several countries in Europe that PKK built propaganda machines. And the most established one was in Denmark and also and especially in Sweden. Why? They built up a printing house over there just to print media for propaganda, either for Turkey, for Iraq, Syria, or Europe, doesn't matter. They prepared good stuff, skilled stuff with a Marxist thinking. So as years passed, this propaganda machine somehow spread the idea that they are under pressure or looking for independence or blah, blah, blah. But in this day, now we are communicating easily. They can search the backgrounds of the people. They can just check in what criminal activity they are blended with, and they can decide it. But a friend of mine just argued one thing, and I think it's correct because he's reliable. He says once any coming from Turkey and claim that he is under pressure, the governments are asking this allegation, if it's true or not, to civil society organizations of these entities, either FETÖ or PKK. It's not fair for a government, or it's not a logic for a government to confirm any idea by asking civil society organizations, because when you ask, and if this organization is somehow biased towards the Turkish government or have a hidden agenda, then they can easily build up an organization, a community, and spread the idea. Another thing, well, they actually achieved this propaganda. Why? When ISIS appeared in Iraq and Syria, it was the number of 2017. There were almost 50 Swedish individuals in the ranks or in the positions in the cadre of PKK. And these individuals did not only fight against ISIS, but against Turkish army. So how comes? There will be a country nominated to NATO candidacy, and the citizens, I'm not sure if they are special forces or not. I do not know it. Okay. And they fought against Turkish soldiers. And now Turkey will say to this. So, I mean, it's a deadlock then. Another story that's really interesting, right after this printing house, and when Denmark just pushed them to stop the TV broadcasts, they moved some of their TV channels to Sweden. And Sweden has become what? As the hub of the overall PKK activities, that they can easily infiltrate to the other EU member states. And in this instance, I think Swedes are thinking twice. Think that when Sweden takes any action or decision against these individuals, they will see people chanting across the streets, and it's a societal issue that Swedes does not want it. Another issue, well, and it's not only for Sweden, but for other countries as well in Europe, these individuals somehow became a citizen of themselves, including the FETÖ members. So when they obtain the citizenship, now they have the luxury, the opportunity to rise. Now they have deputies in their parliament, pro-PKK. And once you reach a certain point, and building up an area of diffusion into the minds, well, then you can enhance, expand your organization thinking, and you don't need to persuade, but you have the authority to say something as a mob. And well, Sweden is a bit late in preventing this. And as I said before, Şemdin Sakık, a terrorist of PKK, currently in a jail of Turkey, they can just go to the prison and visit them. He confessed that PKK killed Olof Palme, former Prime Minister of Sweden. And
so
now,
was there a response from Swedish government or intelligence to this allegation?
I didn't hear it. But it's an inconsistency. It's a contradiction. Somebody will kill your prime minister, and then you will keep them, grow them, feed them, and send them to somewhere and provide weapons, etc. It's a total contradiction. Who can, explain this? I don't understand. So, the logic is a bit different. By the way, if I have time, I want to delineate one more thing.
Please.
For the membership of these two countries, we have to check the dynamics of the EU. It was 4 days ago, the French presidency announced that in accordance with the Article 42 of the Union Charter, they will support Sweden and Finland to become a NATO member, and in case there happens an assault, an attack, etc., they will defend them. Well, no problem with this. I mean, they can defend them. But if NATO membership is just a sort of correlation of EU membership, then it's a problem. They are totally different organizations. They can cooperate, but if you argue that we will support their membership because of the EU Charter, I mean, the logic is a bit different. Then Turkey has the right then to claim this. Okay, if they will be NATO members, I will be EU member. Sorry. And solidarity is not an excuse. And I think NATO should also focus on the most vulnerable countries in Europe. That's totally a security hoop and a potential escalation area. Well, let's think about Bosnia and Herzegovina, for instance. NATO rejected Ukraine's demand to become a NATO member, and now they are fighting. If Bosnia-Herzegovina cannot become a member, then expect another escalation in Balkans. So what should be the priority in admitting any country for NATO? If it's the membership to the EU, well, then expect another escalation in Balkans. So I think NATO should start a process for Bosnia and Herzegovina. Another issue is Moldova, Transnistria. If NATO wants to be more stable, more secured, NATO must have an eye on this country, because the only communist administration is in the territory of Moldova as Transnistria. So at the end, NATO must decide something, what the vision is, and I believe that strategic concept in June 2022, in the coming month, will finalize it, what the intention is, and what should be the priorities. Currently, we will see the vision, no problem with this. Expansion is a vision, I agree. But what about the priorities? I mean, we have to think it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aslan. So this is I
think Talha Hoca is down. So Vişne Hocam, it's on you to moderate this session.
It should be Finland and Sweden.
So let me ask you a question, please.
Please.
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Aslan.
And then we can conclude it. Talha Hocam, are you in?
yes, I'm back.
Yes.
So,
Okay, it's on you to finalize.
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Murat Aslan. Really, it's a controversial issue, and as far as I know, both Turkish public and European public is not aware of many of the things that you mentioned. I think it's our responsibility to make it more valid and transparent discussion and address real questions and concerns. I mean, as far as I see, Turkey's main objection is not a fundamental objection, but there are certain issues that needs to be taken more seriously. And also, I would also like to thank to Vişne Hocam because there are also larger geopolitical ramification that needs to be discussed. I mean, enlargement of NATO to that direction will have long-lasting impact on NATO's strategic doctrine, and without discussing those, issues, I think it would be quite early and premature to make this decision. So I think it's, we will have ample time to discuss, go back to those issues, whether this will make NATO stronger, weaker, or what will be the objections. But I think this debate will continue, and I think our responsibility is to direct this discussion debate to a more rational discussion, more rational, rather than an emotional discussion, which we see in European and Turkish public as well. Thank you very much for your contributions. And I think what I'm saying is that this debate will continue. And I think we'll have some additional guests on this issue. Thank you very much. Thanks for the listeners.
Thank you.